Well, good evening once again. Day 1169 of the Trump administration. 215 days to go now until the presidential election. Today's White House briefing featured a large cast of characters, at times the president and vice president apparently feeling that social distancing is something for them to recommend, if not follow themselves. When the vice president is talking, it sure sounds like he's in charge. We heard Jared Kushner talk today. It sounded briefly like he's in charge. Ditto the admiral we heard from today, talking about the supply chain and sounding in charge. A number of the daily speakers make it a point to reference data, perhaps because it is a huge problem right now. We still have no idea how many Americans are walking around with this virus. The biggest message from the president today: the states should be handling this. As he put it, speaking on behalf of the federal government, we're a backup. He says the states should have had more equipment and PPE already on hand. He said they should have been on the open markets just buying before the pandemic. And he repeated for good measure, nobody had even heard of something like this. Today, he took a shot at saying out loud what he wants the truth to be going forward. Today, he said the federal government acted early, which is not true. They did not. Here we are, widely considered to be months behind, and we just became the first nation on the planet to mark 1,000 deaths in one 24-hour period. Today, the number of known cases around the globe went past 1 million, 243,000 of those here in the United States, where, again, because of testing, we don't have reliable numbers. Over 5,800 souls have died. In the past 24 hours, 29,000 new cases and over 1,000 new deaths. As for the economic toll, today we learned that last week 6.6 million Americans applied for unemployment benefits. Total of 9.9 million people are out of work right now. The number of people out of work is now a number greater than the individual populations of over 40 states. The White House today tried to reassure Americans that relief checks are indeed on the way.
This money does people no good if it shows up in 4 months, and we will deliver on that promise.
So quickly is a matter of weeks then, perhaps, not months.
Quickly is a matter of weeks and not months.
As we're seeing images of Americans waiting in lines at food banks. By the way, Jeff Bezos today gave $100 million to struggling food banks around the country. There is no question that for millions of our fellow citizens, 2 weeks is too long. And people without direct deposit will have to wait as long as, are you ready for this, 5 months to get their checks. Today at the White House, we also heard a warning from Dr. Deborah Birx, who earlier this week revealed sobering data about the virus and its deadly potential. This afternoon, she sounded the alarm about the effort to contain this outbreak.
I know you've seen the slope in the United States versus the slope in Italy. And we have to change that slope. We have to change the logarithmic curve that we're on. We see country after country having done that. What it means in the United States is not everyone is doing it. So we're only as strong as every community, every county, every state, every American following the guidelines. This is really a call to action.
Not everyone is doing it because a ton of states out there still don't have stay-at-home measures. Amid the surge in cases, state and local officials are struggling to try to help hospitals dealing with those severe shortages of equipment and PPE. States are bidding against each other and competing with the feds out there on the open market. This morning, the president posted this about state officials who say they're not getting enough help from the federal government. Quote, some have insatiable appetites and are never satisfied. The complainers should have been stocked up and ready long before this crisis hit. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, whose state has nearly 100,000 cases, the most in the nation, today made plain just how dire things are.
If a person comes in and needs a ventilator and you don't have a ventilator, the person dies. That's the blunt equation here. And right now we have a burn rate that would suggest we have about 6 days in the stockpile.
Later this afternoon at the White House, Trump pointed to his efforts to respond to the crisis while also seeming to blame governors for not being prepared.
I directed Secretary Azar and Acting Secretary Wolf to use any and all available authority under the Defense Production Act to ensure that domestic manufacturers have the supplies they need to produce ventilators for patients with severe cases of COVID-19. On top of the 3,000 beds we're already providing to the Javits Center, the Department of Defense is adding another 48 ICU beds. Governor Cuomo has asked that this facility go, and it's a big, beautiful facility, it be converted to a COVID hospital. We had 2 other facilities that were likewise asking for it, and that would be in Louisiana and also in Dallas, and we'll be doing those. I think the federal government has not only acted early, but acted quickly, professionally.
What happens, though, when states are bidding against each other on those markets?
Well, they have that, and they have to work that out. What they should do is they should have, long before this pandemic arrived, they should have been on the open market just buying. There was no competition. You could have made a great price. The states have to stock up. It's like one of those things. They waited. They didn't want to spend the money because they thought this would never happen.
That's how that went down, and we mentioned this earlier, rare sighting for the press corps in the West Wing. First time we saw Trump's senior advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner, at the daily briefing. Tonight, the New York Times reports that some administration officials say his work with the task force has added confusion to the response. Today, he spoke about his assignment as laid out by his father-in-law.
The president wanted to make sure that we had the best people doing the best jobs and making sure that we had the right people focused on all the things that needed to happen to make sure that we can deliver in these unusual times for the American people. The president also instructed me to make sure that I break down every barrier needed to make sure that the teams can succeed.
President was asked about what other measures the U.S. might take in the future to keep the virus from spreading in the U.S., like more extensive bans on people flying into this country.
We have more bans than anybody. We had bans when bans weren't fashionable, if you remember, right at the beginning of this administration. It was for different reasons. But we've had bans long before people thought of bans. When I did China, it had never been done before. I was the first one to do it. Remember that. It had never, according to what I read in all the papers, this had never been done. This is a terrible thing to do. And 4 weeks later, they were all saying, we're lucky we did it.
Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today announced a new select committee with subpoena power to scrutinize the response to this pandemic and the administration's management of this new gigantic $2 trillion economic rescue package. Democratic Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina will be its chairman. This afternoon, Trump had this response to the speaker's move.
It's not any time for witch hunts. It's time to get this enemy defeated. Conducting these partisan investigations in the middle of a pandemic is a really big waste of vital resources, time, attention, and we want to fight for American lives, not waste time.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.